Now let's take a look at some of the latest actions at the U.S. Supreme Court impacting education, sports, and transgender students. For that, we welcome the Center Square's education reporter, Esther Wickham. Esther, let's start with the ongoing debate around Title IX and transgender students. What is Title IX, and what are some of the big things coming up that people really need to know about?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. This has definitely been a continued debate for many, many years, but specifically since the Trump administration has started his second term, January of 2025. He's definitely taken a lot of steps and actions from the conservative angle, to bring back the correct interpretation of Title IX as they believe. But Title IX is a 1972 federal statute essentially to prohibit sex-based discrimination in federally funded education programs, and it's become definitely a focal point in disputes over athletics and student safety. And it's definitely been a huge debate when it comes to the conservative and the more liberal side, right? There are people on the left that want to, interpret Title IX as it alludes to gender identity, where transgender people and transgender athletes are protected under Title IX, where on the conservative side, we continue to see people wanting to protect women, since they believed, transgender athletes are not female, are not women. They want to protect women in athletic fields as well as private facilities and locker rooms. And we kind of continue to see many public schools as well as higher education where the Trump administration is investigating and threatening to withhold funding and various actions for what they claim to be alleged violations of Title IX.
What do you think's going to be happening here with the U.S. Supreme Court? I mean, we'll talk here in a little bit about what they already ruled on Monday around a controversial California law, but that's about something separate from the transgender sports question here. What are we anticipating from the U.S. Supreme Court?
Yeah, I mean, they heard oral arguments over the past couple of weeks last month, and the Supreme Court definitely takes its time. They only take around, 66 cases a year, and this is a major case that we have been waiting to hear back from the Supreme Court. And so I believe a decision isn't going to come out until the summer. They love to make constituents wait for the results. But this is definitely an issue the Supreme Court wants to take seriously, because America is definitely divided on this issue. And so probably be around, the summertime when we finally hear a decision. But in that time, we are able to talk to, various sources to get their thoughts on what's happening with this ongoing debate.
And you've got a couple of different sources that we'll highlight here. One in particular is a senior policy analyst at Advocates for Trans Equality. We'll air that. And then in response, seemingly, to some of the language being used in this debate from a Republican U.S. representative. So here is the senior policy analyst for Advocates for Trans Equality.
This should not even be a debate, because this is coming from an effort to dehumanize a minority community in a way that would not be acceptable under any other debate, ? But, there's also plenty of research now comparing states with different policies about bathroom access, and find there's no association between trans-inclusive policies and assaults that happen in restrooms. It's simply a disgusting myth that's being pushed by people who have made it their explicit policy goal to eliminate transgender people.
Now, Willingham also said that there's, quote, no scientific consensus that transgender women athletes have an advantage in sports that would justify any claim that they are somehow outcompeting cisgender athletes. But Wyoming Republican U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman, she questions the ideology behind using such words as, quote, cisgender.
Cisgender is a made-up word. Cisgender that means nothing. Do not call me cisgender. I am a woman. This bill does nothing to prohibit men from competing in men's sports. It does prohibit men from competing in women's sports. It is that simple. All we have to do is look at what happened during the Paris Olympics, where we watched a dude beat the hell out of a woman in a boxing match. We do not want men beating up women. We do not want men in women's soccer or volleyball or basketball or rugby or swimming or any other athletic competition. This isn't difficult.
Esther, obviously, the Supreme Court's going to be releasing some kind of ruling later on this year. But hearing those two, pretty starkly different opinions about this issue, will this debate be settled anytime soon? And what are the impacts on education?
Yeah. As you see from the videos, they're basically kind of saying the same thing, but from two different lenses, right? Ultimately, they want students safe. They want students protected. And the way that they get that and the way that they interpret Title IX for themselves is largely different, right? The conservatives want to protect women in women's sports, and the liberals are saying, well, we also need to protect the women that are getting sexually harassed. The transgender athletes aren't doing that. Why are we coming after the 1% of transgender people, let alone transgender athletes is 0.01%. It's a very small minority in the country. Why is the Trump administration focusing on that when the Title IX interpretation means so much more? So yeah, it's definitely going to be a continued debate, and whether the Supreme Court is the law of the land. They have the final say, and so once their decision comes out, it will be interesting to see how schools react, how states react in implementing policies. And I think at the education field, it might shift entirely in regards to environments, and it will be interesting to see. I can't predict the future. I don't know how specifically sports are going to start to implement this, whether it's going to be, mixed gender, or whether they're just going to continue to have two specific kinds of gender when it comes to sports. There's really no way in saying how these states are going to respond, but I can definitely say that more, blue states are going to react a certain way, and more red states are going to react a different way. So
that's just the issue about the sports side of things, right?
Yeah.
And that's a ruling that we are anticipating sometime this summer from the U.S. Supreme Court. But Esther, as you follow education, you're also keenly plugged in and aware of the separate ruling that came out Monday about a controversial California policy about whether or not there can be secrecy about a child's gender identity. Tell us about this case, and what are some of the reverberations that we're seeing across the country in the education space?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the state of California, which is predominantly a blue liberal state, they have policies implemented in public school districts where, they claim is to protect student safety. And what that means is they have various documents and information on a student of whether they want to identify as the opposite gender, and if they don't feel safe enough to tell their parent, and the school will follow and respect that decision by not telling the parent. So if Danielle wants to be known as Daniel at school, they refer to him as Daniel at school, but when they talk to the parents, they say her, she, Danielle. They don't, let the parents know that she's identifying a certain way as to respect her decision. And so this case kind of came about April of 2023 after two teachers sued Escondido School District because they said our religious beliefs are against that. That violates it. We're Christians. We believe that parents have a right to know. Parents should be able to understand what's going on. And after those teachers sued, it was an avalanche. More parents joined in. There was a family that unfortunately their daughter had attempted suicide because she was identifying as transgender at school. The parents did not know, and she became more and more depressed because her community, didn't know. She felt isolated, and so they joined the lawsuit as well. And it went all the way up to the Ninth Circuit here in California, and they ordered a stay order saying, actually we're gonna place this on hold, and we believe that other cases are more important. But the Thomas More Society, the attorneys that represent these parents and the teachers, believe that this was an emergency, and so they filed an emergency motion to the Supreme Court, and we saw for them a victory. The Supreme Court ruled in a 6-3 decision that parents do have the right to know that the California policies allowing public schools to withhold information about students' gender transition, it is not, a constitutional right. Parents have the constitutional right under the First and 14th Amendment to know, and they're the primary protectors of their child.
It's pretty remarkable. And of course, you talked with special counsel for the Thomas More Society, Paul Jana, and he says this is something that school districts across the country are going to have to take note of.
So every school district, every state that has these policies on the books should immediately get into compliance with the Supreme Court's ruling here and rescind those policies. They're no longer lawful. So I think, the AG Bonta has aggressively defended these policies, but the Supreme Court has now kind of clearly established that these are unconstitutional. So it's time to turn the page and get in compliance with the court. So.
Next steps on this goes back to the lower courts, or are states ready to just go ahead and start following the Supreme Court's order there?
Yeah, in my conversation with John, I asked that exact question because, he says this is going to be a national thing, right? The Supreme Court has spoken. They are the supreme law of the land, and states are going to have to follow suit. And California is definitely going to push back, right? AG Bonta has continually filed many lawsuits against the Trump administration when it comes to these transgender policies. And in my conversation with him at a conference a few weeks ago, I asked him about this case prior to the Supreme Court's ruling, and he believed this is not a parental rights issue at all. This is about student safety and protecting student safety. And something that he believes to be true is this, it's up to the state to protect the kid, because the parents could potentially be dangerous and abusive if they find out and don't agree with their child's decision. So it's a really interesting conversation because, again, it's the different perspectives, right? They believe they're protecting children, and the conservatives believe, and now the Supreme Court has said that parents have a constitutional right to protect their child and do their child as they see fit until they're 18. If they want to transition, if they want to change their name after 18, that's completely fine. But, it can't be up to the school districts to advise whether they tell the parents or not. So, again, I can't predict the future, but I'm sure we're going to see definitely some pushback from the school districts.
And we'll definitely continue our reporting and our conversations on this and other issues impacting education with the Center Square's education reporter, Esther Wickham. Esther, thanks for taking time with us.